I believe we are, it says excellent connection.
Excellent.
So I hope I am, I believe I'm broadcasting.
Awesome.
You're broadcasting.
All right. Well, good evening. I'd like to call to the order the June meeting of the Westville Planning Advisory Committee. Roll call. We have Councillor Clary McKinnon present, CEO Scott Weirs. We have remotely, we have Councillor Sarah McKinnon and Councillor Mitch McGregor, and possibly soon we may have Mayor Lenny White. So, and of course we have our Development Officer Sean Day with us here today, Planning Development Officer. All right.
And Robert Partington is ill.
And Robert Partington has his regrets. He's ill. Okay. Do we have any additions, deletions, or approval of the agenda?
So, Mr. Chair, we spoke about the one addition concerning accessibility legislation and the impact on downtown businesses. And it's proposed that that would remain as an item.
We'll put that as,
Item 8.
yeah, so we'll call it item number 9. Updates will be 10, and so forth. So hearing that, could I get approval of the agenda as revised?
I would move that the agenda be approved as circulated. With the one addition.
I don't believe we have a quorum. I don't think we can move anything.
That's true.
Scott, I'm going to get a speaker to plug into that so we can all hear Mitchell better for anybody.
Okay, so we'll, I guess we'll just skip through the formal formalities of the motions. I guess we can ask if there's a declared conflict of interest, even though we're not really going to pass anything tonight. So I guess we go straight down to the planning and development report.
Can you
Check
hear
it out,
me,
get
Mitchell,
Mitchell
still?
to speak and see if we can hear him on that.
Can you say something? Sorry. Just,
No, I can hear you.
okay, just say that again.
I can hear you.
Okay, doesn't seem to have,
We may have to do something.
no, I may have it in upside down. Try it again, Mitchell.
How about now?
Did you get a notice on your computer?
Try now.
Okay, I think that might be it. I think I got it now. Setting up device. Okay.
Okay, so let's move on to the planning and development report.
Okay. So, just going to touch on a few things. And if there are any questions along the way, people can shut them out. One of the first ones I wanted to note is the comprehensive renovation at 1481 Campbell's Road. I'm excited about that because it's someone taking one of the older houses in town that has become quite run down, but which has really lovely architectural design. And they're going to completely gut it and rebuild it. And hopefully we'll see more of that as people start to appreciate these existing homes that are scattered all throughout town, but which haven't been maintained over the years. The Porter's Lane apartment renovation one, that's a large one. That's actually a $300,000 project, and it's basically windows and doors. It's,
Wow.
yeah, exactly. Dufferin, we did receive payment on the lot on one of our town small lots, and so
Excellent.
that is now a go. One of the things I wanted to ask PAC is, and I've got a mix in here. Sometimes I put the newest thing at the top of the list of bullets, and in other cases it's gone at the bottom. Do you prefer the newest at the top, so it's basically going in reverse order, or do you want to start with the first item and then go chronologically in time toward the bottom? I'm good with either. I just have to pick one and.
Right, I mean, as long as it shows the status of what each project is, I don't really think it matters which is first or or last.
Doesn't matter to.
I mean, you've done a very good job of updating on the status of each
Deputy
one,
Mayor.
so as long as that's contained in there, it really
So
should.
I'll just pick one and go with it.
Yeah, that's my opinion anyway.
I think I like to put the freshest at the top, and that way you don't have to dig through a whole bunch of things.
I think that's probably
Yeah, so
good.
kind of reverse chronological.
That makes sense.
Yeah, all right. On the new pharmacy on Main Street, there was a little bit of unresolved business, but I was speaking with the owner of the pharmacy yesterday, and he's confirmed that he's getting sorted out there now, so that is completely solid on our books in terms of all the work that happened there. It was a little bit of a go-ahead getting it to that point, but it was kind of mostly miscommunications and misunderstanding along the process that led to that.
And is that, like, is there something we learned from that at all? Like, is there a way to not have that happen going forward? Or was it kind of unique to the individual?
A bit of that, unique to the individual. There are a lot of assumptions about when you need a permit, when you don't need a permit. Most people aren't familiar with the requirements for permits contained in the Nova Scotia Building Code regulations. This was a case where they thought they're changing a commercial use for another commercial use. Why do they need a permit? But they're really very different uses compared to what was in there previously, and so a permit was required. And even were that not the case, just the sheer dollar value of the renovations would have kicked into place a requirement for a permit.
So it's more of an educational than a policy problem.
And I mean, we may want to, at some point, put something on our website talking about that, just talking about when permits are required, because I think there is a lot of generally confusion about that.
And there's a lot of activity.
And yes, there's also a lot of activity.
I mean, this is the activity we know about, how many people are out there inquiring what to
100%.
do and not do, and maybe they're deciding not to do because they don't have all the information.
Yeah, and I think that there are also just a lot of projects that are getting done, probably people thinking they don't need permits, so they just hire a.
There may be some of that going on as
Right,
well.
exactly, and that's not just here, that would be pretty much everywhere.
Across the board.
All right, let's see here. I've got a closed file on a garage, and this is one of the ones I talked to our inspector about, and the last inspection was a pre-drywall inspection. And so apparently it's his approach that with garages where there's no heads and beds, so there's no real life safety concerns, that's the final one that he does is pre-drywall. So the wiring is in place and things like that, the insulation's in, if there is a vapor retarder of some form, that's sorted out. And so I've just had a conversation with him, it's like, if that's where you feel that that's the last inspection, you just have to close it in town suite so that I can see that the file's closed. So we're still trying to work out, how we'll both be on the same page with regard to the status of projects.
Sean, can you go closer to the mic and really project? Because I just had a note that people viewing can't hear you.
I have a problem as well with the fan here, and my hearing isn't the best.
So you have to
you
really
could
project.
So
It's probably picking up the fan more than
my
your
mic
voice.
is off. That may be it.
And you need to be close to your mic.
And a little more kathumpin volume.
Yeah, I always start to lose my voice when I project too much, but I will, well, now that my mic is on, I think we may see an improvement.
Okay.
You'll notice something new in the report, May permit application. So it doesn't cover July at all, but to the extent that I can keep Town Suite, the permitting portal, up to date, I will be able to put out these little reports.
Excellent.
And you'll notice that in May, there was almost $1 million worth of activity, which is good to see. Nothing to report. There's a number of files that were closed during the period. I'll speak a little bit about the Acadia Avenue Development Agreement. As everyone here would recall, we had a very boisterous public hearing concerning that application. It had something to do with following a discussion about a demolition because of an unsightly and dangerous property condition. The decision of council at that time was to approve the agreement, but wanted confirmation on title. And so This has taken a little while because the surveyor that was engaged to do this work really wanted to go through all the literature. There were two conflicting surveys. And in the end, the survey that we believe to be correct and that we are basing the agreement on was agreed to that should be the correct one. And so the development agreement is on solid footing as far as one can tell, having relied on a professional surveyor to look at all the information. And what remains now is that I have to cause that to be advertised, that we are going ahead with that, and notifying the public of the opportunity to appeal if they feel that they're aggrieved. That appeal goes to the UARB. In the meantime, we've been in conversation with an adjoining landowner who felt that the survey, they actually had a survey done, which the new surveyor agreed was correct. And so we thought that that would be adequate for everyone. However, it's the owner's feeling that what she's seeing on the land isn't land that can be developed, it's still hers. So we're arranging to have the surveyor walk the land with that owner in discussion with a solicitor that has become involved in this. That hopefully will happen before we place the ad or before the ad shows up, just so that there isn't more anxiety around the town doing things that it shouldn't be doing. I'm comfortable that placing the ad is the right thing to do at this point based upon the information that we have, but we still don't want to cause unnecessary anxiety. So we're holding off as long as we reasonably can, but at the same time, we need the housing to get built.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's only so long you can push off this.
Is the proponent ready to rock and roll with the construction as soon as
Ready to
this?
start groundwork, but delivery of buildings will be a while, because the longer this is pushed out, the more the people who are going to build the manufactured units. You'll recall that each building is comprised of 4 modular units together. And so Twin Rivers, who's going to be building those, they have a long backlog of orders now. It's huge demand right now for modular units of any kind. And so that's, the longer we wait to get this in place, the longer the backlog grows. And so it's pushing into next year now before we would see any buildings on the site, which is really unfortunate, but
Mhm.
it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, we want to be
And nothing
absolutely
that
clear.
the town could have sorted out,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Like, it's between the two landowners, and Westville, per se, doesn't have a dog in the fight.
I was approached about a woman who wanted to get on the wait list as soon as possible for a unit, and
I
wanted
bet.
to know if there was in fact a wait list, and it looks as if the wait will be longer than anticipated. There is a great demand, great demand.
In the report, I mentioned nothing to report during this period on the exploration of flag lots and landlocked lots. That's not entirely correct, because there is mention later on of some work
Mhm.
that I've been doing. So I just wanted to point that out, and I'll get to that in a moment. The Truro Road semi-detached units, we're still working on configuration of those, because it's tied up with the larger property next door that will see potentially 57 units on it. And the two have to work in harmony, so we've just been going back and forth between the owners and the surveyor on how to configure that lot so that they can get moving in terms of putting those semi-detached units on without jeopardizing in any way the larger project.
Mhm. And there's 2 different developers or the same developer?
Same developer.
Same developer,
Yeah.
okay. Makes it a little easier then?
Just different phases, I guess is one way to think of it.
Yeah, I mean, they're really, one will be as of right development, and the other will be a development agreement. I do hope to get the zoning changed on the small piece of land to R2, because that will allow the development of the semi-detached units rather to be divided and sold separately. So at some point, the owners will come forward with an application to rezone that property.
Okay.
On the major plan amendment, I think I've spoke before about how challenging the formatting is to work with. It ties up your computer in knots anytime you try to do anything with it. Someone joked that You know, when you're working with a large Word document, if you move a picture around, Word will go, okay, fine, you move that picture, I'm gonna wipe out all your formatting. Because it just can do some cantankerous things when it's of a mind to. I did speak with someone about possibly engaging them to help us with this. And when I looked at, I haven't had a chance to speak with the CAO about this, but what they think it will take is substantial. So I will have to talk with Mr. Weirs about how to proceed with that. And in the meantime, I keep working on my own formatting skills. That sounds like something that we should all know, but Word makes it challenging. Development agreements, not there. On dangerous and unsightly. Hang on, let me back up. I blew right past the flag lot card. I have been working on potential policy concerning flag lots. There is already a policy in place, policy G22, that talks about us developing flag lots, but the only one that's in the land use bylaw is for C4 zone uses in Pictou. That's the only flag lot that can be created right now in the land use bylaw, even though policy encourages it for residential uses. So I don't know why, but for whatever reason, we just never, or no one ever wrote into the land use bylaw provisions for creating new flag lots for residential purposes, even though the policy called for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got, I would say, half of that sorted out right now, and for our next PAC, I hope to come in with a draft to present and get some feedback on it.
For anyone that may be watching, could you just give a brief definition of what a flag lot is, but also for me, such lots may feature a pole. You use the word pole, exclamation marks around it. What is a pole when you're dealing with a flag lot? I have no idea.
Let's do this. Since we have flags right behind me, here's a pole. Here's a road out here. So the pole is a thin strip of land or an easement that goes out to the road from the main part of the lot, which is behind other lots in front on the street. So it could be encircled by lots. Its access is either over an easement or a piece of land that is actually attached to this.
So a pole is actually a narrow strip running into the flag lot.
Yes.
So
Okay.
traditionally, that flag
And that was
lot,
a very good visual explanation that you just gave.
Couldn't have been easier, really. I mean,
It couldn't
So-
have been.
a flag lot would be access to land that you would normally not be able to access because it wouldn't have the road frontage
correct.
to use.
That's right.
Okay.
That is now understood by me and all the many people watching at home.
So it unlocks potential development land.
There's quite a bit of land that meets these criteria within the town. A lot of it is within the service area of town, and so it makes it either easier or possible to develop those lands, which currently are a challenge or impossible. In two cases right now, the people who have actually written in applying for us to consider changing policy and bylaw in order to facilitate this, they can't do what they would like to do right now, because in both cases it would involve creating new lots. And right now the policy is only that, or the regulation is only that you can use existing flag lots. So if you have an existing one that has access to the road, and the traffic authority would be okay with using that based upon where it falls or it meets the road, you could do a development on that. But in many cases, I won't say most because I don't have the stats on it, it's where you need to actually put in place a right-of-way or create a new lot in order to make use of these lands.
Or to subdivide a lot into a flag lot.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and so I'll have that, as a draft for PAC next time, if all goes according to plan, and if no bigger or more important things are.
Mr. Chair, the mayor is in the meeting.
I would like to welcome Mayor Lenny White, who's joining us remotely. Welcome, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, sir.
Yeah, I've had great technical difficulty. But finally got on. So I've been watching on YouTube prior to actually joining the meeting. So I think I'm up to date on what's going on. Thanks.
Excellent.
I had a quick question. Sean, if we could pop back to the property development on Acadia Avenue.
Yes?
Where it's referenced, it says title confirmation is now in hand. And I remember the reading that we had by council at the council meeting, and we had Ms. Fraser there. It was my understanding at that time, everything had kind of been sorted out, and everybody could kind of see whose land was whose. Has there been a further problem since then, or?
It's not so much that there's a further problem. It's because there were conflicting surveys, the motion from council required that we get written confirmation from a surveyor stating that the title to land that is involved in the development agreements is correct, and that, you know, Twin Rivers has the ability to enter into these agreements, or this agreement rather.
Right.
The part that is a challenge is that Ms. Fraser doesn't feel that what is represented on paper is reflected on the ground. She feels that where survey markers are on the ground are still on her land, and not on, you know, showing the boundary of land between her land and the land in question. And so that's why I feel it will be very helpful for her to walk the land with a representative along with her of her own choosing, to chat with the surveyor so she can better understand, you know, what's difficult to see sometimes on paper, she'll be able to see it on the land with the surveyor.
Did we know that there were two surveys up front? We did know
That was discussed,
there
yeah.
were two conflicting surveys all along.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And the developer knew.
And the developer knew that there were two, so
Yeah.
everybody,
Yeah.
And I agree that even though, I mean, Westville doesn't really have, you know, it's between the two landowners, but if we're going to publish, we should give them the opportunity, like you say, to make sure that everyone's very much aware where the markers are before we advertise.
it seems that a lot of things that come along, we run into problems with them, and they're not of our doing. It's something pre-existing, and this has happened so often in this town. It's quite annoying, because people on the outside looking in, they might believe that there is some dereliction of duty or whatever, but there isn't. This is historical blunders from a way, way back.
This particular one seems to go back about 30 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And in my opinion, we're just doing our due
Do you
diligence.
feel that once she does walk through and sees the property ownership, that she will feel content in what's taking place, or?
I really have no way of knowing that. I don't know what she's basing her contention that the land is not as being described by the pins that have been placed. So I can't say. I'm hoping, though, that you know, between the discussion with the surveyor, who I find to be a very clear communicator, and her representative that she brings along, hopefully that conversation between the three of them will comfort her in so that she understands that she has the land that she's entitled to.
Yes, yeah, and that should be taking place on the 27th of this month?
Well, no, that's when I told the lawyer who has become involved on the part of Ms. Fraser that I had, you know, we can't wait forever. I'm hoping that she will arrange this meeting before then. If council decides to direct me to hold off further, you know, that can be done. But right now I'm suggesting that on the 27th I want to arrange to post the ad. It won't go up that day, of course. There will be some more time between the time that I send the ad in and it gets posted, but hopefully they will get out on the land before then. The surveyor said he would make himself available whenever it works for Ms. Fraser.
Okay. Thank you.
See you. Okay, anything else here? Oh, talk about surveys and lands, or lack of surveys. I have a lot of conversations with people who really don't know where their properties are, but want to do things on their properties. And there's one noted here about someone that wants to build a shed but felt that they owned quite a bit more than they did. And they only found out what they didn't own when the town did a tax sale on a property over on Duff Street. And they had already built a deck on the side of their house that pretty clearly goes over onto this land, and they and the neighbor have both been using a portion of the land that the town posted as a tax sale as a driveway that they both share. And so it's easy enough on these old lots for this kind of thing to happen. And it obviously creates challenges. It's unfortunate that it seems that lawyers here aren't having people get location certificates when they buy properties, because that usually cleans this kind of stuff up. Location certificates are usually good to about 6 inches, which is, you know, close enough without going to the trouble of a full survey.
Right.
But it seems that a lot are relying on title insurance instead. And so really, you're buying a piece of land that is a certain size, but you actually don't know where it's located in space. So I'm not sure how that's helpful.
Yeah, so liability-wise for the town, if we grant a permit to say to build, right, it's up to the property owners to make sure he knows where his property is, right? I mean, what if he builds half of his building on somebody else's property, they get it surveyed, and it goes right through the porch?
So we would normally ask for a site plan. We have to ask for a site plan because whether it's the building inspection side or the planning side, setbacks are always one of the considerations.
Right.
So for example, if you're putting up a residential single-family dwelling and you're less than 1.2 meters off a property line, you can't have any windows. If you go over 1.2 meters, you can have 7% unprotected openings. And so it really can get down to inches in some cases. And so that's why it is important to get a site plan, but then it is their responsibility to give you a site plan that's accurate.
Well, that's my question. How do you know that the site plan they give you is where the actual pins that don't exist, they feel they are?
Right. And I don't know that we want to cause people to do surveys for every small project. That would be the only way of having, you know, even then it's not 100%. As you can see, we have 2 surveyors.
Exactly.
Mature, seasoned surveyors saying 2 different things. It's not an exact science when you're talking about properties that are 100+ years old.
Right.
And they talk about fences that don't exist, trees that don't exist.
So I guess my question just goes back to the permit. Is there any liability to the town to submit a permit
I think that if we
or approve a permit
I
that's
think
based
if
on?
we have the person applying provide the site plan. I mean, this is, if you really want to pursue this, the CAO, I think, would have to talk to our solicitor about.
Okay, I'm just curious.
I don't have a
all
legal
coming
answer
from there.
for that, I'm afraid.
All right.
We had a complaint about a fence that was erected not too long ago on North Street. Our bylaw requires that the last 6 feet, 2 meters more or less, of a fence be dropped down as it within 2 meters of the front lot line. It only has to drop down to 4 feet, so I'm not sure that it actually provides better sight lines. But it didn't. It was still at 6 feet, which you're allowed to erect everywhere else without a permit. And so the person who had put it up thought that they did everything correctly, but they were very good about rectifying that. It was done basically the day they got the notice. They took the fence down in that last panel section down to the required amount. So yeah, it's nice when it goes that way. On the other hand, we have ongoing challenges on the illegal apartment conversion on Drummond. I got a call recently from the tenant who is legally in the space, saying that an electrician was in her space without her giving approval for them to be there. Actually, a couple of electricians and apparently 2 of her children were sleeping in the house at the time. Didn't know why there were people in the house. Right. So I've written I think they're both owners and property managers involved in this, the same company, and I haven't heard back, so I'll have to pursue that again. Maybe we'll move to having our solicitor write them something.
Yeah, we may want to do that.
On active transportation, on June 30th, coinciding with Canada Day, we're going to have more engagement, the final public engagement happen at Acadia Park, And so there should be lots of people around, and I think that'll be interesting to see what kind of commentary we get. Apparently right now we've got 46 survey responses, which is a pretty good start on getting surveys. And there will be a phase 1 report to council. I think it will be coming sort of midsummer, after they have time to digest all the public feedback. I don't have anything on Westville Public Transit. Mr. Weirs, do you have anything on that? Any updates?
Well, just that it's running, and they're picking up people at the 3 stops that we have in town. So one is right outside here at 2042 Queen Street, one is at the post office, and one is at the senior citizens residence on Porter's Lane. So I think it's been the last week, and I've witnessed people getting on and off buses, so I think it's working. I've had no complaints. And I suspect that we'll get an update from Pictou County Transit. After a month or two, they'll share with us some numbers about what ridership's like and that sort of thing. So I personally was very encouraged to see anybody getting on. Like the first few days of a new transit line traditionally are way underutilized, and I kind of personally expected there to be nobody for the first couple of weeks getting on or off, but I have seen people getting on and off, so that's great.
If I may ask, do any of those stops relate to what we came up with the work we did using the survey and GIS?
All of them.
Perfect, thank you.
In the sense that, it identified the general areas
Right.
of where people wanted it, and so that's what we went with.
And I guess
Some
we'll get
minor, movement
Sure.
to make it work, but yeah.
and do we have signage for these stops?
Can-
Already kind of
can I ask-
shelters?
Yeah, there's signs up. Go ahead.
Just a quick comment, Scott. We may want to consult with Transport Canada on the placement of the one in front of the post office in its proximity to the train tracks. I know we had to move a crosswalk at one point. It might not be an issue, but I just happened when I drove by on Monday morning there, I did notice it is kind of pretty close to the train tracks, and I know they've got some pretty big setbacks in that space. So
Okay.
just a comment. That's all.
Well, that's a good catch, Mitchell. I'll ask the question. I don't know what the answer will be, but let's ask the question. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, and I only raise it, and I probably would have not thought of it, but folks on council may recall we actually had to off a sidewalk and move it down further before your time here, Scott, because they did a safety assessment of that, and again, it was Transport Canada that did it,
Okay.
and they came back and said it had to go.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I did receive one concern about the 3 stops that 2 of them were sort of on the lower end of town, and the one up here at the town office. And people have to realize that those sites were actually picked at a public meeting where people went up and put their little recommendations on a map. And I think some people may in fact think that there could be some servicing going up Church Street and cutting across, or at the top of Temperance. But I think at some point people will be able to just put a hand up, and maybe even now, can they, along the route?
So a couple of things. You're absolutely right, Councilor McKinnon, that there was a public meeting and people came out and voted. In addition to that, there was a survey process that people could do online, and we had a bunch of people, 46 or 47 different responses is my recollection, where people were also suggesting where there might be the right place to do it. So we tried to use both art and science in landing on the three stops that we were allowed. So we were only allowed 3 stops in the town. During the 3-year pilot process. Potentially, there could be more stops as the system matures, and there could be more routes. But again, that would require a bigger investment by the town and more ridership, and that's what I guess we're hoping will happen as people use the system as it is now. If we demonstrate utility and take-up, then it makes sense to expand the system and provide different routes, and maybe it could be Church Street or Victoria Street or wherever. But that's, we have to kind of learn to walk before we run with a brand new transit system.
And by that time, we'll have a long-term care home in the community as well, so which will, will have effect on it, right?
Would change, may change the kind of dynamics and the population, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Right, that's all I wanted to touch base on the planning report. And since we can't approve it, we can move on to the next item, I suppose.
Yeah, as long as no one has any other questions, we'll go on to public participation
Well,
program.
one
Unless-
question, if I could, Deputy Mayor. The situation with the Shaw-Clayton proposed development, we're looking at a potential for testing the market by erecting 7 modular units on Drummond Road, and it's under discussion. Is that discussion going anywhere right now? Do we have any kind of a time frame when the Shaw Group might be willing to proceed with those 7? Because there was a tremendous interest by the Shaw Group some time back to get rolling.
Do you want to handle that, or?
Yeah, I can try. I don't know how to succinctly answer your question, Councillor McKinnon. I think there is real interest, but I really don't have a timeline. On the one hand, it sounds, during meetings with them, it sounded like they wanted to do something tomorrow, by next Friday. And then at other points in the meeting, it sounded like it might be 12 months out. So I'm not exactly sure, and I don't think they're exactly sure at the moment.
Because the impression a couple months ago was we're almost ready to rock and roll as soon as something is
Right.
Well,
determined.
do they still not have to collect compaction data for subsidence as well?
In the area they're talking about, it doesn't appear so.
Okay.
So it's an area that was not
Outside.
disturbed by the open pit mine. So it's on the margins of the mine, the old mine site. And so they want to do a little bit more work, but they're sort of, it sounds like, they're quite convinced that it is not an issue, the subsidence isn't an issue, or stability isn't an issue. And so I think that's kind of why they're trying to ride 2 horses simultaneously on this one.
So there's an added complication on that as well, because the lot size that they're proposing, they want to build these to sell, not hold. So they want them to be on individual lots, and the lots would be 35 feet wide, which is fine, but we don't have any bylaw provisions for lots that are 35 feet wide. And one doesn't want to have to do a development agreement for something like this for 7 lots for 7 modest houses. And so we're looking at having a conversation with them about maybe putting a different unit there that could be on a bigger lot, and so they wouldn't be, offside with respect to our land use bylaw.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll go on to number 7, public participation program policy.
Do we want to, do we have
that other agenda item before public participation?
Nope, that's after the Old Truro Road DA
Okay.
discussion.
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay, so everyone hopefully had a chance to review this, mostly this evening. I don't want to review it line by line. I would just like to get feedback to see what people thought of the approach I took, which basically divided what we have to do up into two different kinds of consultations with the public. One being with respect to projects or developments or changes that impact in a very local way, very concentrated way, and how you would advertise and engage the public with respect to those sorts of changes. And the other one was something where we're contemplating things that aren't local but rather broad and may impact the entire town and even reach into neighboring municipalities. And so putting a sign on a lot or notifying people within an area doesn't make sense when you're talking about a project that will impact the broader area, but it certainly can make sense if you're talking about a development agreement, for instance, in the middle of an existing neighborhood. One thing that I included in this, our development agreements and site plan approvals, they are not listed as planning documents under the MGA, but I felt that it made sense to speak to them here because they are things that definitely can have an impact within a local area, as we know. And so I didn't think it hurt to include these. I may have to make some specific mention that they're not listed as planning documents in the MGA, just as part of this policy, so people are clear on that. I do think, though, that we should include contemplation about how we wish to engage the public with respect to those two kinds of policy, or not policies, but rather planning applications. Mitchell, I know you read it carefully. Did you have any thoughts?
I didn't have any issues with it when I read it. It was pretty high level. I'm still a proponent of signs on properties, though. That's kind of where I was before.
Look, I would rather do that than big mail-outs, personally. I think a visual sign is a great way to do things. And sometimes when you do those mail-outs, particularly if you, like, the MGA requires 30 meters, but I think in our bylaw we're doing 60 meters, and you can capture a lot of properties on another street entirely that really have no interest or compelling reason to care about what's happening on the next street over or on the next block. A sign, on the other hand, definitely notifies the people right around that project or proposal that something's going to be going on. And it also, you know, it gives you a visual reference. So doing both doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think that is a reasonable use of staff resources, because for each one of these things, there's staff time that gets tied up. Somebody has to come up with the plan, the sign, make sure it gets posted. Someone has to go and check that it's posted. Like, there's a whole series of events that have to happen, even with respect to getting the mail in and making sure it gets out on time, because there's actual timelines that we're imposing on this. And there is a requirement, whatever we adopt has to be completed before notice of a public hearing goes out. So that can stretch out, you know, our ability to address an application for something that everyone wants to see happen, that's good for the community, but we are adopting a policy that could cause that to get lengthened unnecessarily. So we do want to be careful about what we adopt. Since there's no vote this evening, perhaps what I could ask members of the PAC to do is just take another read through it and provide any feedback that they have. And then I'll come back with another draft updated with respect to those thoughts.
Sounds good.
Just one comment in relationship to the program policy. I firmly believe that we're meeting all the requirements of the Municipal Government Act, and it looks pretty good in my layman's look at it. And I think we should proceed as soon as possible with getting this off the table.
Can I, Deputy Mayor?
Absolutely.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I think I concur with Councillor McKinnon. I think, it's an interesting thing. It's the first time that I've actually virtually observed our PAC meeting. And I couldn't get in, so I was watching it on YouTube. So just a comment. I think, I don't even know how to say this, but a lot of the things that we're talking about seem very complicated, seem a lot of red tape, and I think I'm on record for many years saying we need to expedite things. We need to make it as easy as possible for these developments to go ahead, not throwing out all the rules and that we need to adhere to under the Act and all the regulations and all our zoning requirements and all of that. I'm not even suggesting that, but just on a very, a general level of observation, and maybe some other people that are watching this will feel the same. It seems overly complicated to achieve some of the goals that we're trying to achieve. And I want to ask that how can we make it easier? How can we make it simpler? How can we make it a process that encourages people to proceed, as opposed to making them think, that seems like things that we weren't thinking about that we'd have to address or do, and so I guess I won't proceed with that. So and I'm not saying it well, and I'm probably not expressing it totally appropriately, but it's an interesting situation. It's an interesting thing to observe this meeting as opposed to sitting where Deputy Mayor is sitting right now. It's a different perspective altogether, and I get a different feel for it. I guess that's what I wanted to say.
Actually, Your Worship, I think it's very well put, because I can just envisage some people saying, well, to go ahead with that will take forever. And that's not what we're here for. We're trying to expedite things, and never has there been a need to expedite as there is in this province, as there is in this country, and in many other places that are facing massive shortages in housing and the costs of apartments escalating all the time. And never in my lifetime have I seen what is existing today. I mean, during some really hard times in this town and in this province, we didn't see homeless people. And just out on the highway yesterday, a guy going with a big pack on his back, and you could see this was that person's belongings, right? That hasn't existed in great numbers, but it exists today in massive numbers. It's unreal. We got to move forward as quickly as we can.
Reminiscent of the
Mayor,
Great Depression.
you put it. You said you didn't know if you were putting it well. You put it extremely well.
Yes, Your Worship. I mean, it's very important that we adhere to the rules of the MGA, and then the policies that we create, we have to be very careful that it's maximum gain and conscious of the effort that we have to put into it, right? They have to be no-brainers, right, for our residents,
Yeah.
for the amount of effort that we have to put into it.
We can't operate on wink, wink, nod, nod, because, that has gotten this town in trouble from way back. But we can expedite things for sure.
Okay.
There's middle ground somewhere.
Well, I was just going to say, let's keep those points in mind while we're reviewing it, and then we'll come back with some options for Mr. Day.
Thank you.
Any more questions on the public participation program policy?
Onward and upward.
Hearing none, we'll move on to number 8, Old Truro Road Development Agreement discussion.
So I sent out, when I sent this out, I also sent the latest draft showing the proposed subdivision. In the interim between sending this out and today, this past Sunday, I was passing through town, so I stopped in to take a look at where the trail would exit onto the school grounds. And it's a well-wooded area between the proposed area of this development and the school. And it struck me that perhaps it wasn't going to be suitable as an emergency access, but it certainly is needed as a trail to connect this, family development to the school. So I think we need to engage the engineering side to take a look at whether or not there is, from a safety perspective, a need to have the secondary access. There are other options which would be shorter and less expensive to develop. There's also a question about how we land our trail onto the school property. And it's interesting to find out that the school has an easement over land that is owned still by Stones. So the entire road going into the school is actually on land owned by Stones. So they are able to grant us an easement, I think. However, I think that we need the school to be on board as well. So that will be a condition of the development agreement, that they, have that conversation with the school and say, this is what we're proposing, and that they bring back any concerns that the school may have about this. Again, we can't make any motions tonight, and it wasn't intended in any event, but this is just a review of the kinds of factors that we're obligated to look at. There is some redundancy in the way the planning strategy works with things that we have to look at. And so when that's the case, I try to note that, this is, already canvassed elsewhere. And right off the bat, I was wondering if for those of you who have had a chance to go through this, if there were any particular questions or if there were any sections that you felt we should discuss this evening. All right. Just as in broad strokes, some of the things that I'm proposing in the development agreement for this, which is it's a large piece of work. The way I envision this rolling out over the course of time is that this will act in almost all respects like an R2 neighborhood, apart from the fact that it will facilitate placement of mini homes, not just other forms of single and 2-unit dwellings. And so I'm trying to write the agreement in such a fashion that at the end, over the course of the 3 or 4 phases, it can all be discharged into a regular R2 neighborhood. We have to find a place for a mail center on the property. That has to be done. The owners are leery of spending a great deal up front on consulting fees based upon some previous work, but we need to have a conversation about, what a bare minimum that we require in order to feel comfortable moving this forward through the process. We're proposing to use what are typically called alternative development standards, which basically just means less wide roads. Wide roads tend to result in speeding. They present a much less safe area if you've got kids playing. There's more land that snow has to be cleared from, so there's more expense in that. There's more down-the-road maintenance for the town because it's intended that these roads be taken over by the town. There's just more pavement that would have to be done, more potholes that have to be fixed. And there's also more runoff when we have intense rain events. The larger the hard surface, the more water is going to hit our storm system and create havoc as it descends to the natural drainage systems that we have around town. So those are kind of two of the main things. The way this will work now is that as lots are sold, there will be provisions that are clearly related to the people on those lots in terms of having to maintain setbacks, where they can put accessory buildings and those sorts of things. So those will, so long as the development agreement is in place, they will have to maintain, or they'll have to abide by those requirements. the owners who are doing the development will abide by the other ones that don't pertain to individual lots which are sold. So that took a little while to kind of sort out how to have that flow as lots sold within a phased development, where you have some of the land being owned by the developers, some of the land being individually owned, all under the same agreement, the town being involved at different points with respect to road takeover potentially, if we take it over in phases, or not until the very end. There's a lot of moving pieces in this. Hopefully we'll more or less get it right.
Now, have you been working with the developer with these proposed initiatives?
We've been talking about all of this
Okay,
on an
so,
ongoing basis.
has there been any resistance to anything you proposed?
Not so far.
Okay.
But the only resistance is to what extent detail can be provided by them regarding the civil side of things.
Okay.
And we're going to have a meeting with them next week to kind of hammer that out.
Okay. Yep. As long as the committee's informed of any issues that the developer might have, comes back to us. That's
Mr. Weirs, I'm not mistaken in understanding that we weren't proposing any sidewalk for this development, even though ideally we would have one. I think, again, if we put in place measures to control speeds on the roads, and maybe even have signage going up that talks about it being a shared road, that there will be kids playing and stuff and running around. I would like the road not to be straight the way it's shown, because that makes it easier to go fast, especially exiting the subdivision and going down the hill. Introducing some bends there would improve that, but it may compromise the lots. So that's a discussion I want to have with them.
And can I add to that particular comment, Scott, CAO Weirs? Just, I'm sure there's rationale behind that too, but I always, not that we've had a lot of discussion around this. But I'm always cautious, and I get scared if I hear that we're not planning on putting sidewalks in an area for a whole host of reasons. Accessibility being one of them. So I'm sure there's probably some model communities and examples of where this is good, Scott. So I think, the further we get down the road with this, I think be mindful that residents want sidewalks, right? That's kind of something we've learned recently in Westville. They want sidewalks. So just a point of consideration. That's all.
Yeah, and I'm, it's always that they want sidewalks, but they also want very low prices, and the two don't necessarily meet. And I think that's, the developers that have been showing interest in Westville of late are highly attuned, I would argue, to the marketplace from a price point perspective, which is what they have to do, right? And so there are probably compromises that need to be made, yeah, so point very well taken, and I agree that, sidewalks are better. We just may, it really, the town needs to be careful about scaring away development as well, right? So we have to find that correct line between requiring so much that people decide it's not worth developing, while also making sure that residents stay safe, and those sorts of things. So, as Mr. Day was saying, the path forward is to keep the conversation going with the developers and making sure they understand, the public safety and kind of downstream maintenance concerns that the town has, as well as, we need to understand their price point reality. Because we do want, there would be nothing worse for Westville, I would argue, than to have a development that doesn't sell. We want more residents, right? We want more residents in the town, and the cost of housing, you know, as Councilor McKinnon earlier was noting, we're in desperate need of accessible housing from a financial perspective.
Deputy Mayor, what we also need very badly in the town is the tax resource from these properties, and the faster that they can be built, the better it is for all of us, including the existing taxpayers in the town. So it's when we look at a development agreement, does it have to involve discussions down to the point of 1 tree per lot and so on? I guess it does, but
If you want trees.
yeah, yeah. But 1 tree per lot has to be written in somewhere, or
So if you
what's
don't put something like that, then you might get 1 tree per subdivision, or, you know.
Well, does it mean mandatory 1 tree, or I thought it was limiting to 1 tree? What the hell is this 1 tree business doing in here anyway?
So it's pretty standard that landscaping is part of development agreements.
Yes,
part of
indeed, yeah.
subdivisions, And
I recognize that.
when you do that, you normally, like, in some of the ones I've been involved with and have, you know, had to address for clients or been on the other side actually writing it, you get down to the caliper size of the trees and how they have to be staked. And you can get really detailed on landscaping, the kinds of trees, the mix of trees, like all of that, in order for it to be a success. You don't want someone to put in trees that are of poor quality, that will fail. Then the town has to go and chase them or put the trees in themselves because it's an expectation that there be trees. We know that trees are important for the value of residential neighborhoods. They actually, a tree neighborhood will assess at much higher
Yeah.
value. There's a whole bunch of reasons why we want trees. It's also good from a climate change perspective. There's all kinds of reasons why trees are important. And I thought I was actually putting the minimum, the bare minimum in by saying that on every 50 foot there would be a tree.
Yeah.
That was my feeling.
Right. Yeah, and
Oh,
I think
okay.
the other reality.
I thought it was maybe limiting to 1
No.
No. Okay.
This is the minimum that.
Okay.
Well, I better make sure that it's written that way.
Mm.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the reality is, you know, some developers choose to mow down everything and plop homes on bare lots,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
And, you know, if you don't require those developers to put in trees, they won't. And, you know.
Yeah,
so-
this says considering 1 tree per lot, and, but there could be multiple trees on a lot.
We could ask for more. Right.
Okay.
And
yeah.
I do have some areas.
I
where
thought
the-
it might have been limiting to
Okay.
1 tree, and I'm like, good.
So this is kind of a working
Life,
thing, like
yeah.
this is
Okay,
me
yeah,
thinking
'cause
out loud a little bit.
To me, those are negotiables.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to depend on the area. I mean, if it's surrounded by a wood lot, and just that particular lot doesn't go to the tree line, I wouldn't want to lose a development because they didn't bring 1 tree into the lot.
Well, and I was putting these out front on the street. That's
Okay.
where I envision these, and maybe I need to
All
make
right.
that clear too.
Okay.
So that when you drive up the road, it's a treed road. That's also part of traffic calming. The more visual excitement you introduce along a roadway, the more careful people are as they drive. And so I was not imagining those trees being just anywhere. It was
Okay.
street trees, basically.
Okay.
So this is good that we're having this conversation, that what I thought in my head was not on paper, like what I was seeing.
Okay,
not what you guys
I
read.
see your vision now, which sounds great. I just wouldn't want to lose a large development over a tree
Right.
per lot.
Right, yeah, and
I wanna
many,
make that
you
clear.
know, many developers, and hopefully all the developers that we attract to Westville will, you know, if they've got a tree lot, will leave mature trees and work around them, right? That, I mean, that's the ideal. And I think, you know, most good developers do that because they all understand exactly the kind of points that Mr. Day's been making about the value and utility of trees for a whole bunch of reasons. But sometimes it's just easier to mow, you know, it's felt to be easier to mow everything down and
Well,
then
as
you're
the-
left with
as
a
the previous
bare
owner
field.
the previous owner did mow a large swath of this down, because Fiona did hit it and did knock down several trees. And certain species of trees, they can't stand on their own. If they've grown up surrounded by other trees, you can't take down trees selectively and expect them to continue standing. I believe that on the remainder of the lot that is still treed, there actually are a number of trees that could be retained, but there should be an arborist come to that conclusion that, you know, we can, these will work with the subdivision plan, they could be flagged and retained.
So, can I just make a comment, Deputy Mayor?
Absolutely.
I think this goes to some of the stuff I was trying to talk about earlier. Is it my understanding, am I correct in assuming that, you know, the development agreement is not an edict from the planning department or from the town of Westville? It's an agreement that is reached by speaking with the potential developer and coming to consensus on some of these things. So is that correct, number one? I mean, is this, you know, we don't come up with we as a town don't say, okay, Mr. Developer, Mrs. Developer, here's what you need to do, or else, sorry, you know, you don't play in our town. Is there not a negotiation, discussion process where there's some consensus, as I say, to come up with the plan and what itemized matters need to be included in the development agreement for both parties, and it's a protection of both sides.
Absolutely, that's been going on with the developers for quite a while now, as you're aware. They also haven't been involved in a development agreement before, and so
yeah.
they
I'm only saying that because I don't want people to have that impression that this is a top-down, here's what you must do, or else no permit will be issued for you to build in Westville. That's what I'm coming to.
Right.
You know, these things are arrived at through discussions with the developer and come to, as I say, a consensus, an agreement that is then signed by both parties.
Right. There are, however, usually minimum standards below which the town probably shouldn't go. So we shouldn't allow, for example, a road to be constructed in a slapdash way. There needs to be a otherwise, if the town assumes the road, then it's you know, very expensive to maintain and to repair and those sorts of things. So there is lots of room for negotiation, but there are some places at which the town needs to say, sorry, you know, these are the minimum expectations we have for development in our town. Those sorts of expectations are, you know, public health and safety, you know, appropriate construction, you know, make sure that the sewer and water lines are below the frost line so that they don't have to be dug up every year when they freeze, those sorts of things. And
I wasn't intimidating. I understand that, and I agree 100%. That's not what I was talking about. I'm talking about, you know, we were talking, the discussion surrounded trees, you know, how many
Right.
trees on the lot and what were required. Those sorts of things are what I'm
Yes.
coming to. You know, those things beyond the minimum standards that are required, as you say, and I agree 100% with that.
yeah.
Yeah, so there'd be a difference between wants and needs. I mean, we need to maintain a standard. But then there's also wants that, with the discussions with the developers, you come to consensus to doing.
In my experience at this point, we're an unusual municipality in not having requirements around tree planting. It would be the norm to have them, not to not have them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Deputy Mayor, just a quick comment, if I may. You know, this is one of the first ones of this magnitude to come to us since I've been on this council, probably any council in many years. And I think it's probably warranting of a discussion further for us to figure out what are our minimum acceptable standards as a council. What are we looking for? What are the things that we want in these types of things? Because this is just one. We're just talking about one. It's the first one. I know that it's foreign to some folks that trees are in these types of things. I've been involved with large construction projects in Halifax, multi-million-dollar projects in my past life. If you have to take one, and Sean probably knows this as well. In certain places, if you have to take one tree down, you have to plant 5 more or 10 more as part of your development agreement. Like, there's just so much more. But I think it's important as a council that we all make sure we're kind of on board with these types of things, so we kind of know what we're looking at, what we're willing to accept. Like I said, I made a comment about sidewalks. You made a comment about sewer CAOers, and it's like there's so many little nuances with these as well. And I'm not mute to Councillor McKinnon's point either. We need to cut the red tape. We need to cut some administrative burden. We need to get things done. But I don't want to be dealing with the sin of the past in 20 years' time that we hastily push through development for the sake of getting shovels in the ground. And I don't think we're doing that. Not insinuating or implying we are. But I just don't want us to get to a spot where maybe we end up going down that road because we get slammed with another development request and another one and another one and another one, and we kind of lose our finger on the pulse. So I just wanted to put that out there. I just thought that's kind of where things are going in my mind here with it. I think this is a great problem to have for us. I think we all agree this is a great problem to have. But I do think that we need some more discussion internally with Sean and with some folks, just to make sure that we're kind of all on the same page, and we don't end up with taking over roads that aren't paved and dealing with things like that in 15, 20 years time. So that's thanks. No, that's all I had to say with it.
Now, I've been talking middle ground all the way here, and we have to have the protection, but we have to move with post haste on these. How long does it take to put a development agreement together, working closely with a proponent? How fast can you do it with the protections that you need? I mean,
there is no one answer to this. In some communities in Nova Scotia, you can get a development agreement in 3 years. We did one in 3 months, which is unheard of. It's that kind of a range.
Yeah, those kind of ranges, the 3 months is reasonable, but this province, this town can't wait for 3 years on coming up with development agreements, and I know you're not on that page, but I think protection and post haste have to be combined and forward as fast as possible.
Yeah, I agree with you, and a couple notes, I guess, and Mr. Day's already kind of hinted at this. And as has Councillor McGregor, development hasn't occurred in this town in any meaningful way in close to 30 years, maybe over 30 years. We've had, a house built here, a house built there, that sort of thing. Usually it's the eventual owner of the house that is building the house or retaining the contractor. Westville is on the cusp of a very fundamental change. Yeah. A development that is proposing tens of units has not occurred since Angel Street. Yeah. And so the reality then is that the infrastructure and the processes are just not mature enough in town right now. And so we're kind of trying to do two things at once. And the other thing is we're dealing, no developers in Westville have ever had to deal with development agreements before. So it's new to both sides, and there inevitably are kind of learning pains associated with those. I mean, I think Mr. Day's point of, we have heard from a number of people that, you know, Westville is, you know, trying to be nimble. People are giving us credit, giving the town credit for trying to be as nimble as possible, while also being, to Councillor McGregor's point, kind of having enough foresight to not do dumb stuff, and have then, you know, sins, pay sins forward into the future, right?
Yeah.
So that we don't have roads that are unpaved, that, you know, get assumed and are unpaved, and then taxpayers have to foot the bill and those sorts of things. So I think we're on that path, but it does require a bit of a learning curve for the town administration, for council, for developers, and for residents in the town. Because there will be change in Westville over the next little while that people haven't seen before.
That's what I'm so excited about, and one of the things that I'm going to miss not reoffering in October, because there are so many things just about ready to take off, and to look back at the history of this town. Our heyday was actually 100 years ago, when we had a population that was 1,500 more than it is today. We are about to jump forward, not maybe to the same degree of 1,000 people coming in here in a 10-year period as happened between 1911 and 1921, that census period. But we in fact are on the cusp of something that is really going to be substantial.
If I can just add some further context to this particular case. So if, I may be mistaken on this, but I imagine that the Angel Street development was an as-of-right development because it was an R1 development and it met all the R1 requirements. We're not dealing with anything like that right now. And the developers did ask us, like, why do we have to do a development agreement for this? It's like, well, we don't have provisions for the kind of homes you want to put on the lots. That makes this special. We don't have provisions for the narrower roads, which will save you a great deal of money installing and save the town down the road money in terms of maintaining. That makes this special. We're in the zone that this is in a rural residential zone. You can't do this in a rural residential zone, so you have to go to a development agreement as a consequence of that. And only because we have this policy about innovative housing proposals can we look at any of this. Back in 2016, I guess it was, when the plan that we're all working with was adopted by 5 towns, they decided to use development agreements really heavily. You'll recall that at the beginning of this year, we did a development agreement for a single unit above a garage suite, or a garage suite in an R1 neighborhood. To my mind, at least, that is using a hammer to squish a mosquito. You're using the most challenging, time-consuming, resource-intensive, and kind of concern-raising form of development control that you can on very small projects. Shouldn't be used that way, because they are a big deal to use development agreements. We won't easily extricate ourselves from that. The current planning that's going forward on the part of the other towns is not going to get rid of many of these development agreement requirements. And so to, going forward, become more nimble, we're going to have to think about when do we need to use them, and when are we going to use other forms like site plan approval or even just as of right. But we are where we are right now, and we're trying to address an extraordinary circumstance with a challenging tool. Does that help?
Yes.
Definitely.
I agree with Councillor McGregor that this is a great problem to have. And we've talked about this for some time.
Yep.
You know, we're having a little bit of growing pains with addressing all the things that are coming at us. And, you know, I don't think people realize or understand the multitude of development possibilities that are currently on the table for town. And, I just attended a housing meeting for the affordable and supportive housing AGM last evening, the new group that's formed in Pictou County to address affordable and supportive housing. Their report indicated that Westville is their preferred location, that we have available properties that they are investigating. It's public knowledge. It's in their annual report. That's just one small item. But, people are looking at, developers are now looking. We've been saying it forever. One of our biggest assets is that we have all this available property and in space in town. People are, because of the housing crisis that we're in, people are beginning to understand that and are coming to us now. We're not going to them, they're coming to us. So it is a great problem to have. I currently, the reason that I'm not there in person today is because I'm attending a Atlantic Mayor's Congress here in Summerside and Prince Edward Island, and several of the main topics, the reason that I'm interested in it is with regard to housing. In fact, the federal housing minister, our MP, Sean Fraser, will be here on Friday to address the meeting and have discussions around housing. So, it's an important, it's important just not to us in Westville, but it's a countrywide issue. And I just say, go back to Councillor McGregor's comment, which I agree 100%. This is a problem that we've been hoping to have for some time, those of us that have been around the table for a while.
Sorry, Your Worship, what was the function you were at last night that mentioned Westville?
Beg your pardon?
At the beginning, you mentioned a function you were at last night that.
Yes, it's a new group in Pictou County that's addressing
accessible housing,
affordable housing.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's called the Pictou County Affordable and Supportive Housing Association.
Understood.
And they just had their AGM last evening with a new board of directors and people from a lot of different backgrounds with a lot of expertise to bring to the table. And they're moving forward with looking at addressing the affordable housing. And the thing that I like about it personally is that it's also supportive housing. So not just finding housing for people, but giving them the supports that they need to be successful in acquiring the housing and moving forward with their lives. So it's exciting, and we hopefully by their report, as I say, Westville is looked at as being the center for this development to begin.
Well, it is definitely a good problem to have. We have a lot of talented people around the table to solve these great problems that we have. We have a lot of experience around the table that we know what we don't want to see, and we have a vision of what we want the town to look like, inviting, safe, and marketable. So it'll just have to roll up our sleeves and get to work in a timely manner and come up with our basic standards, and we move from there to the vision of what we want to see Westville become. Any more questions regarding the Old Truro Road discussion? Hearing none, we'll go on to number 9, which is accessibility legislation's effect on development and downtown business. I believe that was your point,
I guess
Councilor
that's
McGregor?
me, and I'm going to lean on Sean a little bit with this too. Oh goodness, a blast from the past calling in here. Hold on, I'm on my phone, and I'm trying to figure out how to get back to you folks. I can't see you folks right now until this call ends, and I can't even hit end. There's not even a button. So a few weeks ago, I was contacted by the owner of a local business in relation to just kind of some ongoing concerns about what's going on in their business, where a provincial government agency was in doing an inspection in relation to something totally unrelated to the comments that they made. So they made some comments to the local business about if they were to put seating back out in front, or they did put seating back out, that it would be a violation of kind of their occupancy permit in relation to the new building code that came out a few years ago, because they have I believe it's general assembly occupancy or something to that effect. And anyway, I did learn that Mr. Day was also talking to the same person as well. So we had a good conversation about it. And come to find out that there's some new challenges with the building code and some of the amendments. Historically, if one, took over a business or a location and started, pulled a permit to do some renovations, they needed to bring it up to certain codes and standards and accessibility and whatnot. Now it appears that you don't even need to have to do the renovations or do any changes, and the businesses are going to be held to the standards that they have to upgrade the accessibility standards, which it's next to impossible in some locations to install ramps to access in the front doors and things of that nature. Like, just not reasonable, practical, real undue hardship to some of the employers. And Mr. Day and I talked about, the town of Lunenburg in particular, that, the next time any of those businesses sell to anybody, you might as well just condemn them because they're not going to be able to meet this standard. So I guess it's really, and I'll ask Sean to maybe chime in a little bit more and articulate a few more points that obviously I've probably missed. But my ask of the planning committee and then in through to council next week is going to be, I really think we need to pen a letter to the minister and the premier to take another look at this from a different lens. And if anything, the biggest concern I have is there's no due process, there's no appeals mechanism, there's no way to plead your case to somebody in and around the undue hardship. Like, it's just, it is what it is, and you have to do it, and too bad, so sad. And I don't think that's the way we want our town to have to be forced to conduct business to these existing businesses. Like, right now, it only appears to be one, but it doesn't mean there's not more, and it doesn't mean it's not a deeper seated issue provincially. So yeah, Sean, if you don't mind, do you think you could chime in for a minute just to kind of hit on a couple things?
Sure, I'll try to do this quickly because I've had a bit of a long history in this. Briefly, when I first found out about the changes that we're talking about now, which were brought into the building code regulations a few years ago, I pretty much immediately saw what a challenge it was going to be for any of our historic downtowns, because many of them have, just like ours does here in Westville, buildings right on the street, a few steps up into the main space, and no place to put ramps and no money for elevators. So what does one do? Do you have to keep one business running forever in that space, or do you allow the natural organic change to happen that has to happen in our downtowns? People have to change their business to adapt to changing circumstances in our world. And unfortunately, the nature of this change really targeted assembly occupancies. And so even the smallest little coffee shop, if they want to have any tables, they would have to become completely barrier-free. And that consumes a huge amount of space, and also there is the challenge, as we've been discussing, of just getting into the place in the first place. Back then, I actually asked if the fellows leading up the Downtown Halifax and Dartmouth Business Commission knew anything about this, and they didn't. The province didn't actually chat with them about this or have any kind of public input from them, and they were shocked, and it's created a huge amount of mayhem for the business groups around the province, because there just is no, as Mitchell said, way to plead your case, no one to help. There is some money that's available to help with changes, but it only works in certain cases. Like if you've got a case like Miners, where they've got, I think, 3 or 4 steps starting out on the sidewalk to get in, really hard to do anything about that. And if you're going to suggest that they put an elevator in, well, they're not going to do that because you're into $150,000 or something along those lines right up front. You'd have to change the whole nature of your building, and you'd use up a good chunk of the space you actually need to run your business. And so I've been involved in a number of conversations with certain members of the accessibility organization that's studying this and forwarding these changes. And they say they will be studying how to deal with what they're calling heritage properties, but I don't know if that means ones that are registered properties, or does it mean older properties?
Grandfather.
some sort of grandfathering.
Mhm.
But I don't think that they're talking about that. I think that they're still trying to find a way to cause them to become completely barrier-free, which, as Mr. Weirs can comment on how unlikely it is that this can be done. And I don't think anybody wants the downtowns of Nova Scotia, which are so important to our cultural identity, to all become Tim Hortons and McDonald's, because they are barrier-free. You know, they'll build a new one-story building that doesn't have any residential, and sure, you'll be able to wheel a wheelchair in there, no problem at all. But if we want to use our existing heritage fabric, then we're gonna have real challenges. And what I've been suggesting all along to the province is that there needs to be some moderation in this and some consideration of the collateral damage that is happening. You know, what is happening to the ability of entrepreneurs, often startups, who don't have a lot of cash, from getting their businesses going. We need to be mindful of that, and we need to give that some consideration. And maybe there is a threshold. If you're building something that's over a certain amount of, I don't know, 1,000 square feet, maybe you've got deep enough pockets to create a barrier-free place. But if you're just trying to do a little hole-in-the-wall restaurant to get things going, maybe it's okay to let that, you know, be grandfathered. But that conversation doesn't seem to be happening, and I think that it's an important one that has to happen. One last point on this that is maybe not apparent, but if you want to move forward into a more, a less car-dependent kind of world, what you have to do is you have to build around your downtown core. You've got to make a really attractive downtown core that has all the amenities that people want to be around, and then you look at the housing around that and how to create housing in that, and you create a great place for people to be. And it's more environmentally friendly. It's great for supporting your downtown. It creates a really attractive downtown. It does all of these things. We need to have all guns firing to get to that place. And this one change that's happened, and more changes to come, are going to make it difficult to do, to get to that place, which is a place that, when you look at what's happening with respect to climate change, and we're still in spring and it was 34 degrees before you count humidity today. We have change happening. We have intense storms. We can't sit back and think that doing nothing is going to be okay. We have to think, what can we do to create a world that's less fossil fuel dependent? So I'm going to stop now with that, but that's all related.
Councillor McKinnon would like to be recognized.
Councillor McKinnon, you have a question?
Just a comment. I believe, you know, obviously we all want accessibility to be our reality. We're trying to do things in a more inclusive manner. As the chairperson for the Accessibility Committee, I am 100% committed to that. But I do have some major concerns, and I think that if we're writing this letter on the behalf of council, I think it's important to state, like, you know, these are great rules to put into place, but if you're saying that these are standards that need to be met, where's the funding behind that? Because it certainly can't come from new business owners who are running a business that formerly had tables in the business before. So I can't see why, you know, putting tables in that space would all of a sudden become a problem. And if they're going to create rules that say, you know, there has to be some sort of a ramp or accessibility into historical businesses, then yeah, there's going to have to be a lot of government money that is backing up those rules. And if not, they're just thrown out to the wind, and they're not something that are actually obtainable. So yeah, I see how they would be quite frustrated with that, and I think we need to support our local businesses in order to make sure that they're able to be successful.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Maybe it might be a good idea to have the letter that we're going to send penned by our Accessibility Committee and then pushed by Council.
Yes, that's a great idea.
I just to make a comment, this, in some ways, this doesn't surprise me. Having had experience in the accessibility legislation and regulation world in a different jurisdiction in a past life, I know that it is, it often happens that people think that changing the physical environment is really the way to generate accessibility. And really this isn't my argument would be that this example isn't about the physical space. It's about providing accessible service to people. And you shouldn't necessarily go to thermonuclear warfare, which is putting in a $150,000 lift into a business that probably doesn't generate anywhere near that in a whole year, let alone in a few months, right? So, but there are ways to provide service, accessible service that is dignified to people with disabilities without building ramps or without putting in $150,000 or $200,000 elevators into every small building along a historic main street. And I think that we just need to help the provincial people who are setting these things understand that not every solution to an accessibility issue needs to result in physical change or physical access, right? The issue is, how do you get the service to people with disabilities? And so a good service standard will get you there without requiring huge physical change to buildings. So there is no conceivable way. I've looked at the particular place we're talking about. The ramp would have to end on the other side of the street.
Right.
It is it's not physically possible to put a ramp there. So there is no way to get it in, and as Mr. Day said, there's also no room without tearing apart the entire, using up all the space that the tables would take to put a $200,000 lift there. So it's not possible to get the accessibility solution that is being requested. So it's nonsensical, and all they need to do is pass a service standard that requires people to provide dignified, accessible service.
CO Weirs, have you seen anything like that we can borrow from?
Can I just comment very quickly? I also spoke with the owners of that establishment with regard to this issue. The one thing that needs to be said, and this letter that we're talking about, I agree we need to send something out to the province, came from a person that, I think Councillor McGregor alluded to this as well. The person that made the comment or said they can't put the chairs and tables in has no jurisdiction, in my opinion, to make that ruling. That person represents a different entity altogether within the province and has a very clear function as to what that position entails, in my opinion. So I have no idea why or how that came about. The other thing that I wanted to say very quickly, in conjunction with what the CIO Weirs was saying, we all know that the previous establishment that was there for years and was extremely well received and supported, primarily that most people that attended or visit there on a regular basis were seniors. I mean, it was with mobility issues, I'm sure, many, and yet they were able, because like I think what the CEO was saying, there were accommodations made by the owners and to help them and to assist them, the patrons that frequented that establishment, previous establishment. So these things are I agree. We want to be on record as saying we support the accessibility movement in Westville, which we do, but at the same time, you have to have some sense of reality about situations, right?
And I would argue that minors is being accessible where they're doing meal plans. Like they're literally, you can go in and get a different type of supper every day of the week, and they offer takeout, which is if somebody with a mobility issue has somebody that's helping them or caring for them in any way, it's very accessible for somebody to go in and pick up meals and provide that for people. So I think they're doing a great job, and as the mayor stated, I don't think that there's any ruling that could truly be enforced that would prevent them from having tables in a place that were always tables were in.
So, speaking to the mayor's point about what the person from health was doing in there, apparently one of the owners had a conversation with them because she was interested in putting an outdoor patio out, which would be great because right now the town has none, and it would be nice to see some action on our sidewalks. And this is where the conversation started, because she was advised that, well, if you have outdoor patios, you have to be fully accessible because anyone there has to be able to use the washroom. The washroom has to be barrier-free. You'll probably need another washroom, and it just sort of escalated as a consequence of that conversation. And I think that that's kind of what was the initial discussion that started all of this. And so, you know, the idea of being able to sit at a patio and maybe having another way if you should need to use a washroom, and if you're bound to a wheelchair, for example, there could be other ways to, you know, find that amenity within the community in close proximity to where you are that doesn't require every building to have it within the building. And that would be an example of, I guess, a workaround or an approach to provide the dignified service that CAO Weirs is speaking about, without, at this, you know, making it very hard for entrepreneurs to open businesses.
Any more comments or questions regarding the accessibility legislation? Hearing none, we'll go on to updates. 24-unit development on Acadia Avenue by development agreement.
I think we've already spoken.
We've talked quite a bit about that.
So we're good
Okay.
on that one.
Next, IPS LUB amendment.
Same thing, like, you know, through the
Okay.
course of this discussion,
All
we
right.
touched on that.
Property surplus to municipal needs. I don't think we hit that one.
We haven't, and unfortunately, I haven't had time to do anything with it. 'Cause
Well, there we
there's
go.
been a lot of big balls in the air right now, so.
All right, so now we're going to open it up to delegations on issues or discussions arising from business or other business. Hearing none. I guess we can't really do a motion to go in camera.
No motion.
Can't do a motion, so I guess we cannot go into camera. So I guess I'm going to call these, that's fine, at 10 to 8 in the
Just
evening.
before you do that, just for the record, there was mention previously about not having a quorum, but I believe we do have a quorum. Once I was able to access the meeting, I believe we acquired a quorum.
No, unfortunately, Mr. Mayor, I did check the terms of reference, and it requires one community member
Okay.
in addition.
Okay.
So that's where the challenge is.
Yeah.
And just so everybody knows, I think there will be people sticking up their hand saying, you know, I'm interested in being a community member on PAC. That I'm hoping that we get those indications of interest into me, so I can bring them to council on Monday coming. And so if you, I would encourage anybody listening and encourage councilors that if you have know of people in the community who are interested in serving on PAC, now would be the time to have them raise their hand so that you can, on Monday next, select some, so we avoid the unfortunate circumstance of not having quorum.
Well, I'd like,
Just a quick question, if I may, with that, because I know we've been talking about the possibility of maybe adding a new community member to asset management. We floated the idea. Still don't think we have a process baked out what that looks like, even to how to do that, because obviously we have to change the policy. We would have to change the policy at council first to even create that space, but that's a separate issue. But my question would be, in fairness to the chair of this committee, who's not with us tonight, would we not maybe have preliminary discussions in camera with the committee about the applicants, and then have the committee make the recommendation to council for final approval? Or are we just gonna shoot straight to council with it and debate it at council, or in camera in council?
I would think we'd be remiss not to include members of the current PAC in deliberations of new members.
Right, including Mr. Day, who's there as well too. Right?
Exactly.
He would be part of those discussions, and that was kind of where I was kind of going. My inference was just that was my feeling as well, and I'm not pointing out any kind of faults or blame worthiness to anybody on any of it. I think this is really us just navigating a new thing that we haven't had to do here in a really long time. I mean,
yeah.
I think Mr. Oliver was on the committee for years. I have no idea how long he's been on, but it's been for years. So I think it's important for us to just kind of flush out what this looks like for us going forward. Hopefully we don't have to do any replacements with it, but yeah, as Councilor Murphy today in an email he did, I figured it was somewhere in the MGA that obviously some of the stuff has an approval process. So
I think traditionally what we used to do back in the day was the committee would receive applicants, whether be it police commission or whatever, and there'd be an in-camera discussion because there's private citizens being concerned. They would come up to a consensus that they would forward a name after they came out of an in-camera. They would forward a name to council for them to approve them to be on the committee. So,
with regard to the with regard to the police commission, I can say that since I've been on council and was on the police commission, at one point when we had to recruit and replace members of citizen members on the commission, we actually received more applicants than the seats were available, and the CAO of the day and myself, and I'm not sure if anybody else was involved, I can't remember, actually interviewed the applicants, so to speak, and recommended then from the applicants, from the interview process, recommended to the council of the day who would be appointed to the commission. I'm not saying we need to do that with this situation, but that to my recollection was how the police commission members, citizen members were appointed.
well, it's definitely an option, depending on the interest that we have. If the candidates are that close, maybe an interview will have to be conducted.
and I guess the opposite to that, which I've seen happen in my work world. Just because there's, in theory, there could be a situation where there may only be one applicant. It doesn't necessarily also mean that by default they end up with the position either, because they were the only applicant. So I think there's due process on both sides of the coin as well. And my thought is that this committee should probably discuss it before it actually goes to council. Would just be my only 2 cents, but. I don't know. I don't know if our procedure spells it out. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it should.
Yeah, our procedure doesn't, but or our terms of reference don't. But if you want to do that, that's fine. It's just you'll be doing it in July, not in June, and so you'll be having another meeting down one person, and that's fine.
Be another interim meeting, just on one issue?
There could.
Yeah, we could have a special meeting on that as well.
Well, and the other side of the coin is too. I mean, let's call it what it is, and this is going to be the theme probably for a lot of things the next 2 months. We're getting into municipal elections in September, so it may even be more prudent and appropriate for the next council to make some decisions on not this, but even some other things going forward. Probably the first time it's been said. But it most certainly probably won't be the last time that's said over the coming months. So I just, I'm not saying we're kind of a lame duck council right now, but we're getting pretty close to, our term's pretty well up. So
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I think the terms of reference doesn't restrict us from doing it. And
No.
if the new council wanted to put in more guidelines into selection process, that'd be probably the best time to do it. It would be after the election.
Just before we finish up, if we finished with that, would it be possible in the actual planning report to, when we look at the 24 units on Acadia Avenue, or if we're dealing with the Shaw and Clayton or the Stone development or whatever we have on the go, could we have a little, just a one-page attachment showing the type of unit that is going to go in? I personally think it would be
You're thinking of a
helpful.
schematic.
Yeah, just a basic schematic so that we understand the type of 7 units that would be going on Drummond Road if that takes place, or the 24 units, what they're going to look like, just so that we have a picture in front of us showing us what the units are going to look like.
Or may look like, because at that early point,
Oh yeah, may look like, this is what they are considering.
they have shown us units.
And they change.
Right.
Tentatively.
So
But
one-
as they
one
change, could
meeting-
we get an
Right,
updated
yeah.
picture? I mean, it's a pretty simplistic request, I think, just to have an idea of what they're going to look like.
As long as we don't hold them to it.
Well,
Oh, no, no,
Any
no.
particular
no.
version of what the,
No,
what we
no,
see.
no,
yeah,
no,
yeah, I don't-
absolutely no holding.
But it does help to have a visual in your mind when you're
Yeah,
discussing
I
the
just
property.
want to have something visual, because we've had so much discussion on some of these, and I'm trying to picture what they're going to look like, and it would
Yeah,
be
fair enough.
so much,
It's interesting.
Advantage.
You think about the length of time we've been talking to Shaw, because when we first started talking with them, they were talking about these lovely 2-story townhouse units, and now they're down to basically mini homes with a front door. So that's been the path that they've gone on over the course of the last.
yeah. Well, sometimes we would be left behind and still envisaging the
Wow.
2-story unless we get an update. right?
Exactly. And that's probably just decisions they make on their market research of what the market is maybe out
There's
there.
a number of factors.
Yeah.
It has to do with the team that they have out in the rural areas, as they're calling it,
Mhm.
doing the building, and there's a number of reasons that they're kind of
Yeah.
transitioning this. They're just worried, because our market, when's it gonna stand? They don't know,
Yeah.
because there hasn't been enough action in our market.
There's been no development for
Yeah.
30 years here.
Right.
Exactly.
They really don't know.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, well, if, I thank everyone for attending tonight. If everyone's agreed, we will adjourn.
Thank you.
All right, good night, all.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Thanks for accommodating us. I know it's sometimes a little bumpy, but I think it worked out well.
All
Hey,
right,
Vince, for some of us. Thank you.
bye-bye.
All right, thanks, guys.
Yeah.